Hello and welcome to Middle East Matters. I'm Julia Kim. Coming up on the show this week. Showcasing a new friendship, Israel hosts the foreign ministers of the UAE, Bahrain, Egypt and Morocco in a historic summit in the Negev desert. Well, Israel is on high alert following a spate of attacks by Arab Israelis linked to the Islamic State group. France 24's jihadi movements expert Wasim Nasser will give us his analysis later on in the programme. And there's a burgeoning new industry in Saudi Arabia, entertainment. The kingdom investing in a once non-existent sector, but rights groups say it's to divert attention from its human rights record. But first, the historic Negev summit saw Israel's Yair Lapid host his counterparts from the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Egypt and Morocco. Lapid said the objective was to establish a new regional architecture that will deter Iran. Well, it follows the normalisation of ties back in late 2020. France 24's Charles Pellegrin has this report.
The Negev desert was the perfect setting for a meeting that was supposed to showcase the warming relations between Israel and its Sunni Arab neighbors. After years of hostility, all the talk was about cooperation and peace building, a change made possible by the Abraham Accords brokered by the Trump administration in 2020.
I think what we are trying to achieve here today is changing the narrative, creating a different future, and building on better hope for us and for our kids and grandkids.
But there are real-world interests binding these nations together.
Shared capabilities we are building intimidates and deters our common enemies, first and foremost, Iran and its proxies.
Despite ongoing talks with Tehran to revive a 2015 nuclear deal, Antony Blinken reassured his counterparts that Washington would continue to work with them to counter Iranian security threats. But closer ties here have led to a breakdown elsewhere, namely with the Palestinian territories. The U.S. emphasized that normalization of relations isn't the same thing as progress in resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, where talks have been stalled since 2014. The Palestinian Prime Minister condemned the summit.
Unless the occupation ends, Arab normalization meetings are nothing but an illusion and a free reward for Israel.
Israel is keeping the door open for Palestinian representatives to take part in future iterations of this event.
Israel is on high alert after a spate of deadly attacks by Arab Israelis linked to the Islamic State group. In a rare claim of an attack inside Israel, the IS group said it was responsible for Sunday's shooting in Hadera, which killed 2 police officers. France 24's jihadi movements expert Wasim Nasser joins me now. Wasim, tell us, what is the Islamic State group's strategy in Israel?
Well, actually, they try to target Israel whenever they can. It's an opportunistic strategy, if I may say so, knowing that a year back, the former caliph asked for more attacks and more concentration on Israel. And here we saw that in less than a week, we had an Islamic State cell acting in Hadera, as you said, and they vowed allegiance, as we see already, to the new caliph, Abu Hassan, which puts a time frame to this allegiance. It happened less than a week after the attack of Beersheba, where also an Islamic State sympathizer committed a knife and a roaming attack, and he was mentioned in this claim, but not as a soldier, as they say, because I think that he couldn't establish a direct link with Islamic State Central. So they have a strategy to attack Israel, and if we see the latest attack, we can see the one in Hadera, the one in Beersheba, but also that they also committed attacks in Jerusalem back in 2017. There was an acknowledged and claimed attack back in June 2017, which one female officer was killed, but also beginning of 2017 in January, there was a killing also of 4 military in Jerusalem, knowing that also from the Sinai, which is in Egypt, they also commit attacks like launching rockets from time to time or damaging pipelines which go from Sinai to Israel or all the way to Jordan.
And explain to us the dynamic then between the Islamic State group and Hamas. How does Hamas fit into this?
They are enemies. Hamas and the Islamic State are enemies, and the Hamas is putting so much pressure on Islamic State sympathizers in the Gaza Strip, with the help of Israel, of course, that pushed so many of them to join the Sinai. And the Islamic State affiliated group in the Sinai, which fueled the group actually, and we have footage of those people vowing allegiance to the new Caliph Abu Hassan. Here we see them. We see them that they are very established in the Sinai, despite the coordination between Egypt, Israel, and Hamas in order to counter them. So the enemies who are Israel and Hamas coordinate in order to fight the Islamic State jihadis and also other jihadis as Al-Qaeda or others.
Now, how is the Israeli government then dealing with this threat?
Well, actually, they were dealing pretty well with this threat because they were able to arrest to stop so many cells and to make many arrests. So they have also this phenomena in Israel where Israeli citizens, Arab citizens, tried to join Islamic State or even joined the Islamic State, knowing that Israel is one of the rare countries that succeeded in sending spies inside the Islamic State. Some were caught by the Islamic State and killed and showed, and some succeeded in having very critical information and spies from also this Arab Israeli community.
Okay, Wasim Nasser, thank you very much for your analysis. Wasim Nasser there, France 24's Jihadi Movements expert. Well, let's stay in Israel because Prime Minister Naftali Bennett says his government will increase the number of work permits granted to Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. Let's take a listen.
Our government is working very hard to improve the lives of the Palestinians in the West Bank and in Gaza. Just earlier today, my cabinet approved 20,000 workers from Gaza to be able to work in Israel.
Well, Israel has imposed a blockade on Gaza since 2007 when Hamas took power in the enclave, which makes it difficult for many to make a living in Gaza. Israeli salaries are 5 times higher in some cases, and work permits are essential for their livelihoods. France 24's Nicholas Rushworth has the story.
It is early morning and there are already people at the Erez crossing between Gaza and Israel. Gazans wanting to cross have to show a work permit. The checks take time. People go to Israel for work because out of the 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza, more than half are unemployed.
At 65 years of age, I have to go and work in Israel so I can help my sons who don't have any work.
Most of those crossing into Israel work in the construction industry, farming, or in restaurants. Fadi, a waiter in Nazareth in Israel, earns a lot more than he would in Gaza.
There's a real difference in pay. I was getting 50 to 60 shekels per day, 15 euros. Now I get 250 to 300.
Zaki no longer has the right to go to Israel to source material for his clothing business. He shut up shop after his permit was rescinded.
I had 50 people on the payroll. That meant 50 families had an income. But in January 2020, I was told I was no longer allowed to go into Israel. I'm still fighting the decision so I can reopen my business.
The Israeli government has said it wants to improve Palestinian livelihoods in Hamas-controlled Gaza. An additional 8,000 permits will be made available, bringing the total number allowed to 20,000. Prior to 2007 and the Israeli blockade of Gaza, more than 120,000 Gazans worked in Israel.
And finally, Saudi Arabia's quest to diversify its oil-dependent economy has seen the emergence of a once non-existent sector, entertainment. In recent months, women as well as men have been allowed to enjoy parties. But human rights activists say it's diverting attention from the kingdom's human rights violations. Our team on the ground sent us this report from Riyadh.
The beats are intoxicating, even if the alcohol's not flowing at this electronic music festival. Thousands are letting their hair down, even the women. These scenes, unimaginable in Saudi Arabia until recently, took place a few months ago in the capital city Riyadh thanks to this young collective, MDL Beast.
This year we had around 700,000, around 4 days. We had around 200 artists, 50% of them regional and local, and 50% is international.
To the delight of ravers and revelers, the authorities are hoping to expand these sorts of events.
We have here in Saudi more than 50% is under 30. We have a lot of energy and a lot of passion for music.
Until a few years ago, music was banned in public places. For musicians, the change has been dramatic.
Hey guys!
Cafes with live bands have also made their debut.
We
have our jamming sessions with customers that comes and play the live instruments that we have here.
Before the changes, this place would have been stormed by the religious police. Tala, a DJ, would know it's happened to him.
You're taken to the police station, they might shave your head. I mean, it's a different mindset, you know, they perceive things differently, you know. They outlawed or they banned music, they banned gender interaction.
Diversity is becoming more accepted even on stage. At the end of last year, Asil and Yazid became Saudi Arabia's first male-female duo to perform in public.
We wanted to do our best always to show how people from around the world that we can do good music, we can play, we have good taste, we have artists here, not just whatever you've heard about Saudi.
It may be a step forward for musicians and partygoers, but Human Rights Watch warns that these new events are also an attempt to clean up the country's international image and make people forget its appalling human rights record.
Thanks for watching. There's more news coming up on France 24. Stay with us.